Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak have signed off on the cancellation of the Manchester leg of HS2.
Welcome to WatchMojoUK, and today we're looking at the biggest wastes of money the British government has committed itself to in the last few years.
But it really hit Downing Street like a tsunami, did that story.
The MOD. Time and time again, the Ministry of Defence has come under scrutiny for how much money it's being given and for how much of that money is spent on anything useful.
The question is, what do we spend that money on? And this is the equipment plan for the Ministry of Defence.
The Labour Party said in 2022 that as much as £13 billion is being wasted by the MOD each year, with funding constantly increasing each year while other budgets are slashed.
Two of them delivered at a huge cost, £6.4 billion, to project power across the seas.
Much of that money comes from defence contracts that were never actually fulfilled, projects that ran massively over budget, and state-of-the-art military equipment that will potentially never actually get used. They've even spent £1 billion on manufacturing new nuclear warheads.
Nuclear deterrent is the biggest one. Then you've got the Royal Air Force. The Army is getting less of that money.
Though, some argue the MOD's budget should be increased. The wrong PPE.
£8.7 billion lost in total on £12.1 billion of PPE purchased in a single year.
Britain made a lot of mistakes during the COVID-19 pandemic, and among them was this debacle over not being able to order enough of the correct PPE. Hundreds of millions of pounds ended up wasted on PPE that was wrong and outdated, and of the PPE that was usable, a lot of it was still destroyed for being surplus to requirements.
Of that, £670 million, I'll say that again, £670 million of PPE is being written off because it can't be used.
According to the British Medical Journal, about £4 billion worth of PPE was deemed unsuitable and promptly destroyed via burning in the first year of the pandemic.
But this £8.7 billion, I think many will regard as a scandal. I imagine the Health Secretary will have to come to the House of Commons to explain himself.
The government also got charged enormous fines for storing large amounts of PPE it never used, all while hospitals overflowed and people died. Smoking ban.
So in 2043, so what's that, 20 years' time, only those over 35 will legally be able to buy cigarettes.
We're not talking about the original smoking ban that came into effect in 2007. By all accounts, that was very successful.
12% of our population smoke. That's the lowest number since current records began.
We're talking about the policy announced by Rishi Sunak's government in 2023, that the legal smoking age is going to progressively increase until one day nobody will be legally allowed to buy cigarettes.
The number of smokers overall has been steadily decreasing over the last 30 years.
Stopping young people from smoking is a good thing, but many have already wondered if this ban won't limit people's freedom too much. Plus, wouldn't the money be better spent on legislation to ban vaping adverts and flavoured vapes, since existing smoking laws are already doing a good job of stopping young people from smoking?
And of course, drugs are banned and people still take drugs.
The exam results algorithm.
A school which has been on a journey of improvement, expecting its best year ever in 2020, yet 60% of their students were downgraded.
It's not been revealed how much the government spent on the off-qual algorithm that was supposed to determine A-level grades in 2020, but it was clearly a boondoggle from the beginning. The algorithm used information from pupils' predicted grades to generate new grades for them, as they couldn't sit exams during COVID.
Williamson himself claimed today that he'd sought off-qual assurances that there would be no severe inequality.
But the algorithm ended up marking children from underprivileged areas lower than children from well-off areas, multiple grades below what they'd been predicted in some cases. There were multiple resignations, and in the end, teachers' predicted grades were prioritised over the rogue algorithm. So using the algorithm at all was a waste of time.
But that is perhaps just as damning. For if he and other politicians had actually understood the algorithm that was to cause such uproar, they would have known that those inequalities were intrinsic to its work.
Electronic tagging.
That right there. We do ankle bracelet, 24 karat gold.
Tags have caused numerous controversies in recent years. It came out in 2018 that a planned redesign of electronic tags for offenders, which began in 2011, had cost the public purse about £60 million more than planned.
I'm newly released, so they keep an eye on you for about 6 months after you get released from prison, and then they class you as a dangerous person because of that.
4 years later, and it was reported that another £98 million had been spent on trying to expand the tagging system to just 10,000 more people. That's the equivalent of almost £10,000 being spent on each offender just to give them a tag.
Jordan hasn't been able to find another place to live. And his tag will go off at 9 p.m. if he's not let back into his flat.
More notable than all that wasted money for a tagging system that remains completely unfit for purpose, there's minimal evidence to support tagging in the first place as a way to prevent reoffending. Tax dodging.
But actually, if they were honest with themselves, doesn't everybody want to try and avoid paying too much tax?
How much money do we lose to successive governments refusing to crack down on tax evasion? Each year, it costs the country billions of pounds in estimated income, all of which could be used to fund vital public services like the NHS and help with the cost of living crisis.
But who loses if Apple is just managing its tax affairs legally and with ruthless efficiency?
Well, the health service lost.
While some forms of tax avoidance are technically legal, there are other forms of fraud and evasion that absolutely aren't.
The law is an ass. And moreover, it's a law drawn up specifically to benefit the richest and most powerful people.
Scandals about tax dodging have even reached number 10, with the non-dom scandal surrounding Rishi Sunak's wife. Non-doms alone might be taking over £3 billion from the UK's budgets each year. The MP expenses scandal.
What the MPs were planning to do was to publish this stuff with all the salient details redacted.
Never has such a flagrant waste of public money been on display than during the 2009 parliamentary expenses scandal. The Freedom of Information Act was established by the Blair government in the 2000s, and it would paint a bad picture of MPs from across the benches when it was used to get these details years later.
A guy at the other end said, "Hello, would you be interested in looking at a disc of every single MP's expenses?" And I said, yes, I would.
MPs had paid for second homes, nannies, luxury goods and renovations and claimed them as expenses. It was MPs from all parties, and in some instances ended up going all the way to court with a few convictions.
What Parliament proved when they published the expenses themselves was that they had intended all along to give the public pretty useless information.
Nothing says wasting public money than quite literally claiming expenses so that you can pay a hefty allowance to your work-shy adult children. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Is the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan now inevitable?
No, it is not.
Not only did these two wars cost a fortune and last for years, but the lives of many British soldiers were lost in the process. Britain alone spent billions on intervention in Afghanistan, with tens of millions spent each year. The war in Iraq ended when no evidence of WMDs was found, while as soon as the Western powers withdrew from Afghanistan in 2021, the democratic government collapsed and the Taliban took control.
By this stage, there was little doubt that Kabul and the government could fall.
It's a huge case for Western countries not getting involved in the Middle East going forward, as almost nothing was accomplished during 20 years of conflict, in which 454 Britons died, along with tens of thousands of Afghan civilians.
On Sunday the 15th, the Taliban entered Kabul and met almost no resistance. It emerged President Ghani had fled the country.
Biby Stockholm.
High on the cliffs overlooking the Biby Stockholm is one of Portland's two prisons. The government insists this barge isn't a third.
Immigration remains one of the biggest and most loaded issues the British public cares about. But is sequestering asylum seekers on a barge in Portsmouth the best way to handle this? Well, no matter which way you look at it, no. The facts are that not only is Biby Stockholm inhumane, but it's actually significantly more expensive to maintain and keep people living on a barge than it would be to do so on dry land.
The hope is asylum seekers stay on board with a TV room and laptops, one for every 20.
As well as confining multiple people to tiny rooms, far more people than the barge was ever intended to house, it also had an outbreak of listeria that led to it being evacuated.
regardless of your stance, nobody wants to barge here. We haven't got the infrastructure to deal with it.
Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
HS2.
All anyone's hearing is the downside of losing HS2, as some would see it, and none of the upside of what he might do with the rest of the money.
Currently, the UK has only one high-speed rail line, and it's only useful if you're trying to go to France and leave the country entirely. After delays, planning problems, reductions in scope, and spiralling costs, in 2023 it was announced that the northern leg of HS2, which is most of it, was finally going to be scrapped.
Number 10 also decided HS2 will stop 30 minutes outside central London at Old Oak Common.
Though HS2 had many critics, various former Prime Ministers warned Sunak against making the decision to shelve the rail link. Despite all the work that had already been done breaking ground, planning the route, and buying up all the land, they still decided that getting rid of the line was going to be better for the North than committing to it.
I think most people here would say that is a complete betrayal of the North of England, and it's no way to treat this part of the world.
Let us know in the comments what you think taxpayers' money should be spent on instead.
I want everybody in this room to unleash their inner Conservative.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojoUK and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.